The courtroom was massive, built to accommodate dozens of different species from across the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood in the defendant's platform, surrounded by a shimmering force field that kept him separated from everyone else. Above him, the 5 judges of the Galactic Council looked down from their elevated seats. Each one belonged to a different species, and each one looked at Jake like he was something dangerous that needed to be locked away. Jake's translator earpiece fed him the charges in standard English. 17 violations of intergalactic law, unauthorized weapons discharge in neutral space, destruction of property, resisting lawful detention. The list went on. His attorney, a thin insect-like being named Quillix, had done his best to explain the circumstances. Jake had been carrying medical supplies to a quarantined colony. Pirates had attacked his cargo ship. He had defended himself. But the council didn't seem to care about context or self-defense. The head judge, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish with glowing internal organs, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The translator converted it to words Jake could understand. The council had reviewed the evidence. They had considered the arguments. The human had broken their laws and the law must be upheld. The sentence was life imprisonment at Facility Omega-7. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had heard stories about Omega-7. Every spacer had. It was the prison where the galaxy sent its worst criminals, the ones too dangerous to execute and too violent to rehabilitate. It orbited a dying star in a sector of space where nobody went unless they had to. Ships that approached it needed special shielding, just to survive the radiation. The guards came for him immediately after the sentence was announced. They were Vrelian, a species that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a beetle, standing about 7 feet tall with glossy black exoskeletons. Their faces had compound eyes and clicking mandibles that made Jake's skin crawl. They didn't speak to him. They just grabbed his arms with their sharp pincer-like hands and dragged him out of the courtroom. The transport ship was worse than Jake expected. They put him in a containment pod, a small metal cylinder barely large enough for him to sit up in. The walls glowed with energy fields that would shock him if he touched them. Through a small window, he could see other pods containing other prisoners. A massive creature with 6 arms and scaled skin, something that looked like living shadow, a being made entirely of crystalline structures. Jake was surrounded by nightmares. The journey took 3 days. Jake had no room to exercise. The food came through a slot in the wall, tasteless protein paste that barely kept him alive. He tried not to think about what waited for him at the end of this trip. He tried not to think about the fact that he would never see Earth again, never walk under a real sun, never breathe air that didn't come from a recycler. He had 28 years of life experience, most of it spent hauling cargo from one star system to another. Now all of that was over. When the transport finally docked with Omega-7, Jake got his first look at his new home. Through the window, he could see a massive station built from dark metal and reinforced alloys. It looked more like a fortress than a prison. Weapons platforms jutted out at regular intervals. Defensive shields flickered with energy. This place wasn't just designed to keep prisoners in. It was designed to survive a war. The Vrelian guards pulled Jake from his pod and shoved him into a processing line. They stripped him of his clothes, sprayed him with something that stung his skin, and threw prison clothing at him. Gray pants and a gray shirt made from rough material that itched. No shoes. The floor was cold against his bare feet. They took biometric scans, recording his retinas, his fingerprints, his DNA signature. One guard jabbed something into his arm that burned like fire. A tracking implant, the translator told him. Now the station would always know where he was. Warden Zelix came to inspect the new arrivals personally. He was older than the other Vrelians, with scars on his exoskeleton and antennae that had been broken and healed multiple times. He walked down the line of new prisoners, his compound eyes examining each one. When he reached Jake, he stopped. His antennae twitched in a way that Jake's translator said indicated amusement. A human, Zelix said. His voice was high-pitched and buzzing. From Earth, Class 15 Deathworld. How fascinating. Do you know what that means, human? It means your planet is so hostile that most species would die there within hours. Heavy gravity. Extreme weather. Predators everywhere. And yet your kind survives. Thrives even. The Council fears you because of this. They think you're all barely controlled animals. Jake said nothing. He had learned during his trial that arguing with authority figures in the Galactic Council's justice system was pointless. They had already decided what they thought about humans. Nothing he said would change their minds. Sellex continued his inspection. His mandibles clicked together in what might have been laughter. You'll be in cell block 7. We call it the pit. It's where we keep the most dangerous inmates. Murderers, war criminals, beings who have killed more people than you can count. You should feel honored, human. Most of your kind would go to a lower security block, but the council specifically requested that you be treated as a maximum security threat. The warden moved on to the next prisoner, leaving Jake standing there with a guard's pincers still gripping his shoulder. The message was clear. They expected him to die in the pit. They were counting on it. The walk to cell block 7 took them through the main section of the prison. Jake saw other inmates through transparent barriers. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Jake couldn't even figure out which parts were heads and which were limbs. All of them had the same dead look in their eyes, whatever shape those eyes took. This place killed hope long before it killed bodies. Cell block 7 lived up to its nickname. The moment Jake walked through the entrance, he could feel the difference. The air was thicker here, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies and chemical cleaners. The sounds were different too. Growls and clicks and hisses echoing off metal walls. The cells were arranged in 2 levels around a central common area. Guard stations sat behind reinforced glass at strategic points. The guard pushed Jake toward cell 47. The door slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. Inside was a space about 10 feet by 10 feet. 2 bunks attached to the walls. A toilet and sink combination in one corner. That was it. And sitting on the lower bunk was the biggest living thing Jake had ever seen. Draxus was a Korgath, a species Jake had only heard about in stories. He stood at least 9 feet tall with gray skin covered in thick bony plates. His arms were massive, each one thicker than Jake's torso. Tusks curved up from his lower jaw, yellowed with age. His eyes were small and red, buried deep under a heavy brow ridge. Old scars covered every visible inch of his body. This was a being built for violence. The guard shoved Jake into the cell. "Good luck, human," the Varelian said. "Try to last until morning. It's been a while since we had entertainment in this block." The door slammed shut behind him. Draxus looked up from where he sat. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Every instinct told him to press himself against the far wall, to make himself as small as possible to show submission. But he had learned something during his years in space. Showing fear to a predator just made you prey. Instead, Jake walked to the upper bunk and started making up the thin mattress with the equally thin blanket they had given him. He could feel Draxus watching him. The Korgath's breathing was deep and slow, like a bellows. The cell felt smaller with both of them in it. Finally, Jake spoke. "I'm Jake Morrison, from Earth. I guess we're roommates now." Draxus didn't respond. He just kept staring. Jake continued making his bunk, trying to keep his hands from shaking. "I know you probably don't want to talk. That's fine. I just figured I should introduce myself. Seems like the polite thing to do." More silence. Then, surprisingly, Draxus spoke. His voice was deep, so deep that Jake felt it in his chest. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Jake admitted. "But being afraid won't help me survive. So I might as well act like I'm not." Draxus's expression didn't change. "I've killed 43 beings. 17 of them were guards who tried to discipline me." "That's impressive," Jake said, and he meant it. "Must take a lot of strength. You think flattery will save you?" "No," Jake said honestly. "I think nothing will save me if you decide to kill me. You're bigger, stronger, and you have natural weapons. I'm just a human. So if it's all the same to you, I'd rather we just coexist peacefully. I don't take up much space, I don't snore, and I won't bother you if you don't bother me." Draxus was quiet for another long moment. Then his tusked mouth opened slightly in what might have been a smile. "You're strange, human." "I've been told that before," Jake said. He climbed up to his bunk and lay down, staring at the ceiling. His body ached from the transport. His arms still burned where they had injected the tracker. Everything about this situation was wrong and terrifying and hopeless. But he was still alive. And as long as he was alive, he had choices. He could give up or he could survive. Jake Morrison had spent his whole life surviving. This was just one more challenge. Jake woke up to the sound of the cell door opening. A guard tossed something inside that clattered on the floor. 2 meal trays with the same protein paste he had eaten on the transport, plus something that might have been vegetables. The door closed again before Jake could even sit up. Draxus was already eating, scooping the food into his mouth with fingers the size of Jake's forearm. The first week was about learning the rules. Not the official rules that the guards told you, but the real rules that kept you alive. Jake learned that you didn't make eye contact with certain inmates, that you kept your hands visible when you walked through the common area, that the showers were the most dangerous place in the block because the guards couldn't see everything that happened there. He learned which guards would hit you for talking and which ones would ignore you completely. He also learned about his cellmate. Draxus had been a warrior on his homeworld, part of a military tradition that went back thousands of years. He had been captured during a war and sentenced to life imprisonment for actions that his people considered honorable, but the Galactic Council called war crimes. He had been in Omega-7 for 16 years. 16 years in a cell, with nothing to do but eat, sleep, and occasionally fight off inmates who thought they could take down the famous Korgath killer. Jake started asking Draxus questions, not about the violence or the crimes, but about his homeworld. What was it like? What kind of plants grew there? What did Korgath families look like? At first, Draxus ignored these questions, but slowly, over days and then weeks, he started answering. His voice would get softer when he talked about the red deserts of his planet, about the honor ceremonies where young Korgath proved themselves, about the mate he had left behind and the children he would never see again. The other inmates watched this strange partnership with suspicion. A human and a Korgath talking like old friends. It didn't make sense. In the pit, you kept to yourself. You trusted nobody. Friendship was weakness that could be exploited. But Jake didn't seem to care about their expectations. The water dispenser on the second level broke during the third week. It just stopped working, leaving 20 cells without access to drinking water. The inmates complained to the guards, but the guards said it would be fixed when maintenance got around to it. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. In the meantime, if you wanted water, you had to go to the dispensers on the first level, which meant going into territory controlled by different inmate groups. Several fights broke out over access. Jake looked at the broken dispenser during rec time. He stood there for a long time examining it. Then he went back to his cell and tore a strip of metal from the edge of his bunk frame. It took him an hour of bending it back and forth to break it off. He used the edge of his toilet to sharpen one end into a makeshift screwdriver. When rec time came around again, he went to the dispenser and started taking it apart. A guard named Krell watched him through the transparent barrier of the guard station. Krell was younger than most of the guards, with an exoskeleton that still had a greenish tint to it. He had only been working at Omega-7 for 2 years. He was curious about the human who had somehow survived 3 weeks with Draxus without getting killed. Now he watched as Jake pulled components out of the dispenser, examined them, and put them back in different configurations. The dispenser gurgled, and then water started flowing again. The inmates on the second level crowded around, testing it, making sure it really worked. They looked at Jake with new expressions. Not quite respect, but something close to it. The human had fixed something the guards couldn't be bothered to fix. Jake became the person you went to when something broke. A toilet that wouldn't flush. A bunk frame that had come loose from the wall. A light fixture that flickered and hurt sensitive eyes. He couldn't fix everything, but he tried. And more importantly, he didn't ask for anything in return. He just fixed things because they were broken and he knew how. The guards started noticing other changes too. Violence in Cell Block 7 was going down. Not by much, but enough to show up in the weekly reports. Medical calls were dropping. Even the food fights in the mess hall seemed to be decreasing. Krell mentioned this to Lieutenant Vex, his superior officer. She told him to keep watching the human closely. Anything unusual needed to be reported immediately. Jake started teaching during rec time. He used a flat piece of metal as a whiteboard, scratching on it with a piece of broken ceramic. He taught basic mathematics to anyone who would listen, geometry and algebra and probability. Some inmates ignored him, but others, beings who had been treated like animals for years, sat and listened. They worked through problems. They asked questions. For a few hours a week, they got to think about something other than survival. One inmate, a reptilian being named Eskar, asked why Jake bothered. Why teach them things they would never use in prison? Jake's answer was simple. Because your minds are still yours. They can lock up your bodies, but your thoughts belong to you. Learning keeps you sharp, keeps you human, or whatever your species equivalent is. The chess game started in the 5th week. Jake had carved pieces from scraps of material, using different shapes so beings with different visual systems could tell them apart. He set up a board on one of the tables in the common area and started playing against himself. Eventually, curiosity won out. Inmates started asking what he was doing. Jake explained the rules. The idea of a game where you captured your opponent's king, where strategy mattered more than strength, fascinated them. Krell watched Jake teach the game to a group of inmates. The human was patient, explaining each piece's movement multiple times until everyone understood. When someone made a mistake, Jake didn't mock them. He just explained what they could have done better. The guard found himself drawn to the game. During his break, he approached the table where Jake sat alone, studying a board position. "Can you teach me?" Krell asked. Jake looked up, surprised. In 5 weeks, no guard had spoken to him except to give orders or insults. But there was genuine curiosity in Krell's compound eyes. Jake gestured to the seat across from him. "Sure, white or black." They played 3 games. Jake explained strategy and tactics, showed Krell how to control the center of the board, how to protect the king while developing an attack. Krell lost all 3 games, but he didn't seem to mind. For 30 minutes, he wasn't a guard and Jake wasn't a prisoner. They were just 2 beings playing a game. Other guards started paying attention to Jake after that. They noticed how he greeted them politely when they passed his cell, how he never complained about the food or the conditions, how he broke up arguments between inmates before they became fights. A prisoner named Gormath, a massive being covered in spines, had gotten into a dispute with another inmate over territory in the common area. Both of them were ready to fight, and in the pit, fights usually meant someone died. Jake stepped between them. He didn't raise his voice or threaten them. He just pointed out the logical consequences. If they fought, the guards would lock down the entire block. Everyone's rec time would be canceled. The already limited privileges would be cut even more. Was pride worth making 60 other inmates suffer? Gormath and the other inmate backed down. The guard who had been reaching for his shock baton stopped. The fight that should have happened didn't happen. And in the guard station, Krell filed a report about the incident. The human had prevented violence without the guards needing to intervene. Lieutenant Vex read the report with her antennae twitching in irritation. She called Krell into her office. "You're getting too close to the prisoners," she told him. "Especially the human. He's manipulating you." "I don't think he is," Krell said carefully. "I think he's just trying to make his situation better, and everyone else's situation better in the process." "That's exactly what a manipulator would want you to think," Vex said. "Watch him closely. If he steps out of line, deal with it immediately." But Jake didn't step out of line. He followed every rule. He attended every count. He kept his cell clean. He worked the jobs they assigned him in the prison workshop without complaint. The only thing unusual about him was that he treated everyone around him with basic decency. And somehow, impossibly, that was changing Cell Block 7. Draxus noticed it too. One night, lying in his bunk, the Korgath spoke into the darkness. "The others respect you now." "Some of them," Jake said. "Others just tolerate me." "In this place, tolerance is respect," Draxus said. "I've been here 16 years. I've never seen anyone do what you're doing." "What am I doing?" "Making this place less terrible," Draxus said. "One small thing at a time." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I had a choice when I got here. I could accept that my life was over and just wait to die. Or I could try to live whatever life I have left as well as possible. Even if it's in a cage." "The guards are talking about you," Draxus said. "I hear them during the shift changes. Some think you're dangerous. Others think you're interesting. That young one, Krell, he watches you like you're a puzzle he's trying to solve." "Is that bad?" "I don't know," Draxus admitted. "In here, attention from guards usually means pain. But this feels different. Like maybe, for the first time, they're seeing us as something other than animals." Jake climbed down from his bunk and looked out through the small. 3 months into his sentence, Jake had become a fixture of Cell Block 7. The inmates no longer saw him as the weak human who would be dead within days. They saw him as the engineer, the problem solver, the teacher who treated them like people instead of criminals. The nickname had started as a joke, but it stuck. When something broke or someone needed help figuring out a problem, they came to Jake. The education sessions had grown beyond mathematics. Jake taught basic physics to a group of inmates who worked in the maintenance department. He explained Earth history to beings who had never heard of his planet. He even started teaching English to those who wanted to learn a second language. The translator implants everyone wore made communication possible. but there was something intimate about learning to speak another being's native tongue. Krell attended these sessions when his duties allowed. He sat in the back of the common area, officially monitoring for security threats but actually listening to Jake explain Earth's past. The wars and the peace treaties, the scientific discoveries and the artistic movements. The guard was fascinated by how a species from such a hostile world had developed complex cultures and philosophies. He had always been told that Deathworld species were barely civilized. Jake was proving that wrong. One day, Krell approached Jake during rec time. The human was alone, working on a new chess set carved from different materials so the pieces would be more durable. The guard stood nearby, his mandibles clicking nervously. Jake looked up and smiled. "Want to play another game?" Jake asked. "I want to understand something," Krell said. "Why do you do this? You're serving a life sentence. You'll never leave this place. Why spend your time helping others?" Jake set down the piece he was carving. "Because what else am I going to do? Sit in my cell and feel sorry for myself? That won't change anything. At least this way I'm making something better, even if it's just making rec time more interesting." "But these beings are criminals," Krell said. "They've hurt people. Killed people. Don't you worry that being kind to them validates what they've done?" "I don't think teaching someone math validates their crimes," Jake said. "And yeah, everyone here did something to end up in this place, including me. But we're all still people. We all still have minds and feelings and the need for something beyond just surviving. Taking that away doesn't rehabilitate anyone. It just makes them more broken." Krell's antennae twitched. "You talk like you don't belong here." "I don't," Jake said simply. "I was defending myself and the people depending on those medical supplies. But the council didn't see it that way. So here I am. But whether I belong here or not doesn't change the fact that I am here. And I get to choose what kind of person I'm going to be while I'm here." The guard sat down across from Jake. He picked up one of the chess pieces, examining the careful detail Jake had carved into it. "I was told humans were violent, unpredictable, that your species barely controlled its aggressive instincts. Some humans are like that," Jake admitted. "Just like some Vrelians are cruel and some are kind. Species don't determine who you are. Choices do." They played chess that day and several times over the following weeks. Other guards started joining them. A female Vrelian named Nixis who worked in the security office. A guard named Thorvik from a species Jake had never seen before, with blue skin and 4 arms. Even Lieutenant Vex eventually sat down to learn the game, though she maintained that she was only doing it to better understand the humans' influence. Jake treated them all the same way he treated the inmates, with respect and patience. He didn't try to manipulate them or gain favors. He just played chess and talked about whatever topics came up. The guards found themselves telling him about their lives. Nixis talked about her hatchlings back on the Vrelian homeworld. Thorvik complained about the station's terrible food, which apparently didn't meet his species' dietary needs. Even Vex, stern and professional, eventually mentioned that she was studying for a promotion exam and found the strategy practice helpful. The relationship between guards and inmates in Cell Block 7 started changing in small ways. Guards began greeting inmates by name. They responded to complaints about broken equipment instead of ignoring them. When an inmate had a legitimate problem, they listened instead of assuming it was manipulation. The change was subtle, but everyone felt it. Warden Zelix noticed. He spent a day observing Cell Block 7 personally, watching from the security office where the prisoners couldn't see him. He saw Jake teaching a group of inmates about orbital mechanics. He saw Krell sitting in on the lesson. He saw how the inmates moved through the common area without the constant tension that usually filled the pit. There were no fights that day. No incidents that required guard intervention. The warden called Krell into his office that evening. "Tell me about the human," Zelix said. Krell explained everything he had observed over the past 3 months. How Jake fixed things, how he taught classes, how he prevented conflicts, how he treated everyone, guard and prisoner alike, with the same basic courtesy. "He's not trying to escape or organize the inmates," Krell said. "He's just trying to make his life here bearable. And somehow that's making everyone else's life better too." "Interesting," Zelix said, his antennae perfectly still. "The council sent him here expecting him to be broken by this place. Instead, he's changing the place itself. Should we stop him?" Krell asked. "Stop him from doing what? Making my job easier?" Zelix clicked his mandibles in amusement. Violence in Cell Block 7 is down 60% since he arrived. Medical incidents have dropped. Even the other blocks are starting to notice. Inmates are requesting transfers to 7 so they can attend the humans' classes. No, we won't stop him. We'll see where this goes. Jake knew the guards were watching him more closely, but he didn't change his behavior. He just kept doing what he had been doing. Fixing, teaching, mediating. He helped an inmate named Corvix work through depression by teaching him meditation techniques Jake had learned during his time in space. He showed another inmate, a being with multiple tentacles, how to repair the environmental controls in his cell that had been malfunctioning for months. Draxus watched all of this with something like pride. The massive Korgath had become Jake's protector, though Jake rarely needed protection anymore. The other inmates knew that hurting Jake meant dealing with Draxus, and nobody wanted that. But more than that, they didn't want to hurt Jake because he was valuable to them. He made their lives better in countless small ways. One night, Draxus asked Jake a question that had been bothering him. "On your world, were you someone important? A leader?" Jake laughed. "No, I was a cargo pilot. I hauled supplies from one station to another. It wasn't glamorous work, but you know so much. You can teach all these subjects. You understand how things work?" "I had a lot of time alone in space," Jake said. "When you're flying through empty space for days at a time, you read. You learn things to keep your mind active, and I grew up in a family where education mattered. My mom was a teacher. She always said that learning was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you." "She was right," Draxus said. "They took everything else from you. Your freedom, your ship, your future. But they couldn't take your mind." The changes in Cell Block 7 started affecting other parts of the prison. Inmates in other blocks heard about the classes and the chess games. They heard about a place where the guards treated you like a person instead of a number. Some requested transfers. The warden approved a few, curious to see if Jake's influence would spread or if it only worked in his immediate environment. The transferred inmates brought Jake's ideas with them. They started fixing things in their new blocks. They organized study groups. They treated the guards with more respect and found that the guards responded in kind. It wasn't a revolution. It was just small improvements, one cell block at a time. But in a place like Omega 7, small improvements felt like miracles. Lieutenant Vex found herself in an unexpected position. She had been trying to get promoted for 3 years, but her superiors kept telling her that her leadership style was too rigid, too focused on punishment without considering rehabilitation. Now, working in Cell Block 7 and seeing Jake's methods, she was learning a different approach. She started implementing some of his ideas in her interactions with inmates. She listened to complaints. She treated prisoners as rational beings capable of making better choices. And she found that it worked. She talked to Jake about it during one of their chess games. "I don't understand how you do it," she said. "You have no authority here, no power. But you've changed this place more than any policy or punishment could." "I think that's because I'm not trying to change anyone," Jake said. "I'm just trying to be decent. And when you treat people decently, they usually respond by being decent back. Not always, but usually." "But these are criminals," Vex said, moving her queen across the board. "They made terrible choices." "They did," Jake agreed, countering her move. "And they're paying for those choices. But that doesn't mean they can't make better choices going forward. People aren't fixed things. We're all capable of change if we're given the opportunity and the motivation." Vex captured one of Jake's bishops. "You really believe that?" After the transport ship arrived on a Tuesday morning, bringing 15 new inmates to Omega 7. Jake was in the common area teaching a class on basic engineering when the new prisoners entered Cell Block 7. He noticed them immediately. They moved differently than most inmates, with coordinated movements that suggested military training. They were Scarex, a reptilian species known throughout the galaxy for their mercenary work. Each one stood about 6.5 feet tall, covered in dark green scales with yellow eyes that saw in multiple spectrums. They had sharp claws on their hands and feet, and their mouths were filled with teeth designed for tearing meat. Their leader was obvious from the way the others deferred to him. His name was Voss, and half his face was covered in scar tissue from some old burn. He surveyed the common area with the practiced eye of someone evaluating a battlefield. His gaze settled on Jake, and something predatory entered his expression. The human was teaching. The inmates were listening respectfully. The guards were watching but not intervening. To Voss, this looked like weakness. Krell noticed the new arrivals and immediately felt concerned. Scaraks were always trouble in prisons. They operated in packs, establishing dominance through violence. He watched as Voss pointed at different areas of the common room, giving quiet orders to his followers. They were already planning something. Jake finished his class and started putting away his teaching materials. He was aware of the new inmates watching him, but he didn't acknowledge them directly. In prison, staring at someone could be taken as a challenge. He gathered his makeshift whiteboard and the chalk he had made from crushed minerals and returned to his cell. Draxus was already there, and the Korgath's expression was troubled. "The new ones are going to be a problem," he said. "I figured," Jake said. "We'll just stay out of their way until they settle in." "It won't be that simple," Draxus said. "I recognize their leader, Voss. He was a war chief in the border conflicts. He's smart and ruthless, and he won't tolerate what you've built here." "What do you mean?" "You've made this place peaceful," Draxus explained. "You've given inmates dignity and purpose. That threatens someone like Voss. His power comes from fear and violence. In a peaceful environment, he's just another prisoner. He'll try to destroy what you've created so he can rule through intimidation instead." Jake sat on his bunk thinking. "So what do we do?" "We prepare," Draxus said. "And we hope he makes his move somewhere the guards can stop him." But Voss was too experienced to attack directly. Instead, he started with smaller provocations. During meals, his followers would bump into inmates who associated with Jake. Nothing violent enough to warrant guard intervention, just enough to make people uncomfortable. They would stand too close during rec time, invading personal space, making quiet threats. When Jake tried to teach his classes, they would talk loudly nearby, disrupting the lessons. The inmates who had been attending Jake's classes started staying away. They didn't want trouble with the Scaraks. Jake understood. In prison, survival meant avoiding conflicts you couldn't win. He didn't blame them for choosing safety over education. The water dispenser on the second level broke again. But this time, Jake saw one of Voss's followers walking away from it with a satisfied expression. They had sabotaged it deliberately. When Jake went to fix it during rec time, he found that someone had damaged the components in a way that would take days to repair properly. The message was clear. Everything Jake had built could be destroyed. Krell filed reports about the Scaraks' activities, but Lieutenant Vex was frustrated by the lack of actionable evidence. They couldn't punish inmates for standing too close to people or talking too loud. The Scaraks were careful to stay just within the rules while making everyone else miserable. Things came to a head during week 2 of the Scaraks' arrival. Jake was eating lunch alone in the mess hall when Voss sat down across from him. The other inmates immediately moved away, not wanting to be near whatever was about to happen. The guards tensed, hands moving toward their shock batons. "You're the famous human," Voss said in a hissing voice. His translator made the words understandable, but couldn't hide the contempt in them. "The one who thinks he can make this place better." "I'm just trying to pass the time," Jake said calmly. He continued eating, not showing any reaction to Voss's presence. "You're making the inmates soft," Voss continued. "Teaching them games and numbers like they're children. In my culture, we believe strength is the only thing that matters. And you're making everyone weak. Different cultures, different values," Jake said. "That's what makes the galaxy interesting." Voss leaned forward. "I'm going to give you a choice, human. Stop your teaching. Stop your fixing things. Stop making the guards think we're something other than what we are. Or I'll make you stop." Jake finally looked up, meeting Voss's yellow eyes. "And if I don't?" "Then I'll start with your friends," Voss said. "That one you're teaching math. The small one with the tentacles. I'll hurt him first, then others, one by one until you understand that kindness is weakness here." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "Hurting people to prove you're strong just proves you're afraid." Voss's claws scraped against the metal table. "Afraid of what?" "Of being irrelevant," Jake said. "You're used to being the most dangerous thing in the room. But here nobody cares about how tough you are. They care about whether you can help them understand orbital mechanics or fix a water dispenser. And you can't compete with that, so you want to destroy it." The Scaraks leader stood up abruptly. Every guard in the mess hall reached for their weapons. But Voss just smiled, showing all his teeth. "You have 3 days, human. Then I start making examples." He walked away, his followers falling in behind him. The mess hall remained silent for several seconds after they left. Then the normal sounds of eating and conversation slowly returned. But the tension remained. Everyone knew something was coming. Jake talked to Draxus about it that night. The Korgath was pacing their small cell. his massive frame making the space feel even smaller. "He's going to force a confrontation," Draxus said. "And when he does, I'll fight him for you." "No," Jake said firmly. "If you fight him, you'll kill him. Then the guards will put you in solitary or worse, and his followers will come after me anyway." "Then what do you suggest?" "I face him myself," Jake said. Draxus stopped pacing. "He's a trained warrior. You're a cargo pilot. He'll kill you." "Maybe," Jake admitted. "But if I don't stand up to him, everything I've built here falls apart anyway. At least this way I'm making a choice." Krell came to their cell after lights out. He spoke quietly through the door slot. "I heard what happened in the mess hall. We're watching the Scarix closely. If they make a move, we'll intervene." "You can't be everywhere," Jake said. "And Voss is smart enough to make his move when you're not looking." "Then what are you going to do?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Whatever I have to." The next day, Voss made good on his threat. During rec time, he cornered Corvix, the inmate Jake had helped with meditation techniques. 3 Scarix surrounded the smaller being while Voss stood in front of him. "Your friend the human needs to learn a lesson," Voss said. He raised his clawed hand. Jake was across the common area, but he saw what was happening. Without thinking, he ran toward them. "Stop!" Voss turned, lowering his hand. Corvix scrambled away, terrified. The Scarix leader smiled. "There he is. The hero. Leave him alone," Jake said, breathing hard. "Your problem is with me, not him." "My problem is with what you represent," Voss said. "Weakness disguised as kindness. You've made these inmates think they can be something other than what they are. Prisoners, failures, criminals, and I'm going to remind everyone what we really are." "By bullying someone half your size?" Jake said. "Real impressive." Voss's eyes narrowed. "You want to challenge me, human? Fine, tomorrow, right here. We fight, no guards interfering. When I'm done with you, everyone will remember that strength is what matters, not your pathetic attempts at civilization." Jake wanted to refuse. Every rational part of his brain was screaming that this was suicide. But he looked at Corvix, still shaking with fear. He looked at the other inmates watching, waiting to see what he would do. If he backed down now, Voss would terrorize everyone. The fragile peace Jake had built would shatter. "Tomorrow," Jake agreed. The guards heard about the challenge within minutes. Krell immediately went to Lieutenant Vex. "We have to stop this. The human will be killed." Vex checked the prison regulations. "If both parties agree to a sanctioned fight during rec time, and if it's non-lethal, we can allow it." "Those are the rules. Non-lethal?" Krell's antennae twitched with agitation. "Voss is a trained killer. Jake is a civilian." "Then maybe Jake shouldn't have agreed to fight," Vex said. But her mandibles were tight with concern. That night, Draxus tried one more time to convince Jake to let him fight instead. "This is foolish, my friend. You're going to die for pride." "Not for pride," Jake said. "For principle. If I let Voss hurt people to get to me, then I'm complicit in that violence. I have to at least try to stop him." "You're a strange being," Draxus said, echoing what he had said months ago when they first met. "But you're brave. Foolish, but brave." Jake lay in his bunk that night thinking about Earth, about his mother. The morning of the fight, Jake woke before the lights came on. He did push-ups in the cell, trying to prepare his body for what was coming. His muscles were strong from Earth's heavy gravity, but Voss had natural weapons and years of combat training. This wasn't going to be a fair fight. But fair didn't matter anymore. Draxus watched him exercise in silence. Finally, the Korgath spoke. "On my world, before warriors go into battle, they say a prayer. They ask the ancestors for strength and courage. Do humans have something similar?" "Some do," Jake said between push-ups. "My family wasn't religious, but my grandfather used to say something before difficult moments. He'd say, 'Do your best and let the universe handle the rest.' That's good wisdom," Draxus said. The cell block was buzzing with tension during breakfast. Everyone knew about the fight. Inmates whispered to each other, speculating about how long Jake would last. Most gave him less than a minute. The Scarix sat together, confident and calm. Voss ate slowly, savoring his meal like he had all the time in the world. The guards were on high alert. Krell had barely slept, worried about what would happen. Lieutenant Vex had stationed extra guards around the common area. Even Warden Zelix came down from his office to watch. The warden stood in the observation area, his antennae perfectly still as he studied the human. He had seen many fights in his years running Omega-7. Most were quick and brutal. He didn't expect this one to be different. Rec time came. The inmates filed into the common area and immediately formed a circle, leaving an open space in the center. This was how prison fights worked. A ring of bodies with no escape route for either fighter. Jake walked to the center of the circle. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm. Fear was natural. Showing fear was dangerous. Voss entered the circle from the opposite side. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, rolling his shoulders and flexing his claws. He was bigger than Jake by several inches and probably 50 pounds. His scales would protect him from most strikes. His claws could tear through flesh. His teeth could crush bone. He looked at Jake the way a hunter looks at prey. "Last chance to back down, human," Voss said. "Not going to happen," Jake replied. Krell stood at the edge of the circle with his shock baton ready. The rules were simple. The fight continued until someone surrendered or was unable to continue. If it looked lethal, the guards would intervene, but short of that, they would let it play out. Voss attacked first. He lunged forward with surprising speed, claws extended. Jake dodged to the side, barely avoiding the strike. The Scarix's claws scraped against the metal floor, leaving gouges. The inmates watching gasped. That strike could have disemboweled Jake. Jake didn't try to match Voss's aggression. Instead, he moved defensively, staying light on his feet, keeping distance between them. He had learned basic hand-to-hand combat during his brief stint in Earth's merchant marine, but that was years ago. He was rusty and outmatched, but he had one advantage. Earth's gravity was 1.2 times standard galactic normal. He had grown up fighting that gravity every day of his life. His muscles were denser, his bones stronger, his endurance higher than most species realized. Voss attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes. Claw slash, tail sweep, bite attempt. Jake backpedaled, blocking what he could, taking hits on his arms and shoulders rather than vital areas. Pain exploded across his body. Blood ran down his arm where claws had torn through his prison uniform. But he stayed on his feet. The Scarex grinned. "You're just delaying the inevitable." Jake didn't respond. He was watching, learning Voss's patterns. The Scarex favored his right side. He led with his claws but used his tail for balance. His bite attacks were powerful but left him momentarily exposed. Jake needed to wait for the right moment. Voss came in again, more aggressively this time. He was getting frustrated that the human hadn't gone down yet. He threw a heavy claw strike aimed at Jake's head. Jake ducked under it and stepped inside Voss's guard. At close range, the Scarix's natural weapons were less effective. Jake drove his elbow into Voss's ribs, right where the scales were thinner. The impact made a solid thunk. Voss hissed in pain and shoved Jake backward. The human stumbled but kept his balance. The inmates watching were murmuring now. Jake had actually hurt the Scarix. Not much, but enough to prove he wasn't helpless. The fight continued. Voss was stronger and better armed, but Jake was proving harder to finish than expected. The human took punishment that would have dropped most beings, and he kept getting back up. His face was bruised. His arms were bleeding. But his eyes stayed focused. He wasn't fighting with rage or desperation. He was fighting with cold calculation, measuring every movement, conserving energy, waiting for opportunities. Draxus watched from the edge of the circle, his massive fists clenched. He wanted to intervene but knew he couldn't. This was Jake's fight. The Korgath warrior recognized what he was seeing. Jake wasn't trying to win through superior violence. He was trying to survive long enough to make Voss make a mistake. That mistake came 4 minutes into the fight. Voss, frustrated and angry, overcommitted to a lunge. Jake sidestepped and grabbed the Scarix's extended arm. Using Voss's own momentum, Jake twisted and threw him. It wasn't a perfect throw, but it was enough. Voss hit the ground hard. The common area went silent. The Scarix leader climbed to his feet, rage burning in his yellow eyes. Nobody threw him. Nobody made him look weak in front of others. He charged at Jake without strategy, just pure aggression. Jake met the charge. He couldn't match Voss's strength, so he used technique. He blocked the first claw strike, redirected the second, and drove his knee into Voss's midsection. The air went out of the Scarix with a whoosh. Jake followed with a strike to the throat, another to the knee joint, then a final elbow to the side of the head. Voss went down again. This time he was slower getting up. His movements were less coordinated. Jake had done real damage. The fight became a war of attrition. Voss had the weapons, but Jake had the endurance. Every exchange left both of them more battered, but Jake seemed able to absorb punishment that would have ended other fighters. His body, shaped by Earth's harsh environment, refused to quit. Bones that would have broken in other species held together. Muscles that should have torn kept functioning. 7 minutes into the fight, both fighters were exhausted. Voss's scales were cracked in several places. Blood leaked from his mouth. His movements were sluggish. Jake looked even worse, covered in blood and bruises, but he was still standing, still focused. Voss made one final attempt. He gathered his remaining strength and leaped at Jake, all 4 claws extended, mouth open to bite. It was a killing strike, the kind that had ended many fights in his past. But Jake had been waiting for it. He dropped low, letting Voss sail over him, then surged upward, catching the Scarex in midair and slamming him into the ground. The impact drove the breath from Voss's lungs. Before he could recover, Jake had him pinned, one arm locked behind his back in a position that would break bones if Voss struggled. The human's other hand was pressed against Voss's throat, not choking but ready to. "Yield," Jake said quietly. Voss tried to throw him off, but his strength was gone. Jake applied pressure to the arm lock. Not enough to break, just enough to make the threat real. "Yield," he repeated. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Voss, the war chief who had never surrendered, tapped the ground twice. The signal of submission. Jake immediately released him and stepped back. He offered his hand to help Voss up. The Scarex stared at that extended hand for several seconds. In his culture, the victor earned the right to kill. Jake had earned that right and was instead offering assistance. Finally, Voss took the hand and let Jake pull him to his feet. The common area remained silent. Then slowly the inmates began making sounds. Not cheers or applause, but the various noises different species made to express respect. Clicks and hums and low growls. They weren't celebrating violence. They were acknowledging what they had witnessed. Strength tempered with mercy. Power used to protect rather than dominate. Krell stepped forward to take both fighters to medical. Jake could barely walk, leaning heavily on the guard. Voss was in similar condition. As they left the common area, the other Scarex watched their leader with new expressions. Confusion, respect, uncertainty about what came next. In medical, a Vrelian doctor patched up both fighters. Jake had 3 cracked ribs, multiple lacerations, and bruising over 40% of his body. But nothing was permanently damaged. His body was already beginning to heal at a rate that surprised the doctor. Voss had similar injuries plus a fractured jaw and damaged knee joint. The 2 fighters sat in adjacent medical beds, not speaking. Finally, Voss broke the silence. "I don't understand you, human. You could have killed me. My culture says you should have killed me." "My culture says a lot of things too," Jake said. "But I get to choose which parts of my culture I follow. And I choose not to kill when I don't have to." "Why?" "Because killing you wouldn't have solved anything," Jake explained. "Your followers would have just tried to avenge you. More violence, more pain, more damage to what we're trying to build here. But if I beat you and then showed mercy, maybe that teaches a different lesson." "What lesson?" "That strength and kindness can exist together," Jake said. "That being